When I left town for a 2-week business trip, I thought the only thing my grandpa would need to worry about was tending his roses and feeding his cats. He's the toughest old man I know, a Korean war vet who still wakes up before sunrise and insists on mowing his own lawn, even though he's 82. But while I was away, the HOA decided to test him, and they made the worst mistake of their lives. See, my grandpa's house is old. It's been in our family for 3 generations. It doesn't look like the glossy, cookie-cutter homes that the HOA loves to brag about in their flyers. The paint is a little faded, the shutters creak when the wind blows, and the garden is more wild country than pristine suburbia. But it's home, and it's his. The HOA president, let's call her Karen because of course, had been after him for years. She hated that his house lowered property values and ruined the uniform look of the neighborhood. My grandpa never bowed to her demands. He'd smile, tip his cap, and say, "Lady, I fought in a war so people could live free. You think I'm going to paint my house beige because you said so?" While I was gone, Karen saw her chance. One evening, my grandpa called me sounding rattled. "Son," he said, "they just left me an eviction notice. Says I've got 30 days to vacate for HOA violations." I almost dropped my phone. "Eviction? They can't evict you. They're not even a legal landlord. That's your house." "That's what I told them," Grandpa muttered. But they came by with their little clipboards wagging fingers, said if I didn't comply, they'd send the sheriff. That was when I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because I knew something Karen didn't. You see, I'm not just some traveling businessman. I work directly with law enforcement. I don't advertise it in the neighborhood, but let's just say most of the cops in our county don't just know me. They respect me. Some of them even work under my direction in certain federal matters. So when Karen bragged that she was going to call the sheriff, I leaned back in my hotel chair and grinned. "Let her," I told Grandpa. "I'll be home in 2 days, don't you worry." But Karen didn't wait. The very next day, she marched back to Grandpa's house with her clipboard army. My neighbor texted me videos. Karen pounding on the door, shouting about violations, her little posse of HOA board members cheering her on. Grandpa, bless him, stood his ground on the porch, leaning on his cane like a general holding a line. Finally, Karen whipped out her phone and called 911. "Yes, Sheriff? We need an officer to remove a resident refusing HOA orders." I watched the video 3 times, shaking my head. She really thought she could summon the law like a genie in a bottle. What she didn't know was that the sheriff she called had eaten dinner at my table. His deputies had trained with me. One of the detectives she might have reached was literally on my payroll for a joint task force. By the time I got back into town, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Some thought Grandpa was finally going to get bulldozed by the HOA. Others couldn't wait to see Karen put him in his place. But me? I had something special planned. The day I got back, I didn't even bother unpacking. I drove straight from the airport to my grandpa's house. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw the notice still taped to his door in big red letters. Eviction, HOA enforcement. It was laughable. HOA enforcement had no legal weight. It wasn't a court order. But to an old man living alone, it looked intimidating. Grandpa opened the door before I even knocked. "Boy, you came just in time. They said they'd be back. With the police today." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Good. Let's give them a show." Sure enough, 20 minutes later, Karen and her little board marched down the street like a parade of self-righteous peacocks. She wore her usual oversized sunglasses, clipboard in one hand, cell phone in the other. Behind her were 2 HOA lackeys, carrying cameras, no doubt hoping to record my grandpa being dragged out so they could brag about it at the next meeting, and right on cue, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Karen practically squealed with delight. Finally! Finally! We're going to get rid of this eyesore once and for all." The deputy stepped out, and I nearly laughed. It was Martinez, a guy I'd worked side by side with on more than one sting operation. He spotted me instantly, his stern face breaking into a grin. Well, didn't expect to see you here," he said, shaking my hand firmly. Karen blinked, confused. "Wait, you know him?" Martinez chuckled. Know him? Let's just say, ma'am, if it weren't for this man, I wouldn't even be wearing this badge. The look on Karen's face was priceless. For the first time since I'd known her, she was speechless. I folded my arms, keeping my voice calm. Deputy, these folks claim they've served my grandfather with an eviction notice. They're threatening to remove him from his own home. Martinez turned to Karen, his expression hardening. Ma'am, you understand the HOA doesn't have that kind of authority, right? You can't evict a homeowner. That's the court's job. You've crossed a line, Karen stammered. But the bylaws? He's in violation. His shutters are peeling. His yard is overgrown. Ma'am, Martinez interrupted, peeling paint isn't a crime. Harassment is. The neighbors had started gathering across the street. Phones came out. Cameras clicked. I could see people whispering and grinning, waiting for the meltdown. Karen's voice pitched higher. You don't understand. This man... She jabbed a finger at my... Grandpa has been defying us for years. We're the Homeowners Association. We have power. Not the kind of power you think, I said coolly. What you just did, taping a fake eviction notice to his door, is fraud. Calling the police to remove him from his own property, that's filing a false report. You could be facing charges. Karen's jaw dropped. Her board members started backing away slowly, clearly realizing this wasn't going the way they expected. Martinez leaned in close to her, his voice dropping low enough for only a few of us to hear. Ma'am, do you have any idea who you just tried to play games with? The guy standing next to me? I work for him on federal task forces. You don't scare him. You sure as hell don't scare me. Karen's knees actually wobbled. For a second, I thought she might faint. The crowd across the street started murmuring louder, phones raised higher, as if they were watching the climax of a blockbuster movie. I looked Karen dead in the eye. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk back to your SUV, take your little clipboard army with you, and you're going to leave my grandfather alone. Because the next time you pull a stunt like this, I won't just bring the sheriff, I'll bring the DA. Her face twisted into a mask of fury. She wanted to scream, to argue, to demand her way, but she couldn't. Not with Martinez glaring at her, not with a crowd of neighbors watching, and certainly not with me standing there, daring her to push me further. Finally, she spun on her heel and stormed off, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement. Her little lackeys scurried after her like rats abandoning a sinking ship. As her SUV screeched away, the neighborhood erupted in applause. Actual applause. People were clapping, cheering, even whistling. My grandpa tipped his cap and grinned like he'd just won a championship game. I clapped Martinez on the back. Thanks, brother, he smirked. Anytime. Call me if she pulls something again. Honestly, I wouldn't mind slapping cuffs on her next time. Grandpa leaned on his cane, chuckling. Boy, I don't know what kind of work you've been doing out there, but I sure am glad you're on my side. I put an arm around him. Always, Grandpa. Always. The days that followed were some of the most peaceful my grandpa had experienced in years. For the first time in a long while, the HOA patrols stopped showing up at his door. No more fake violation slips tucked under his doormat. No more photos of his yard mysteriously appearing in community reports. Karen had gone silent, but silence in her case didn't mean surrender. 2 weeks later, an HOA meeting was scheduled. Grandpa almost didn't want to go, but I convinced him otherwise. This isn't just about you, I told him. It's about everyone she's bullied. If we don't show up, she'll spin the story however she wants. So we went. The community hall was packed. More neighbors than I'd ever seen at one of these meetings filled the folding chairs, whispering and buzzing with anticipation. Karen sat at the front table with her board members, trying to look calm and professional. But the tight grip on her gavel and the twitch in her jaw gave her away. She cleared her throat. Tonight's meeting will address recent misunderstandings regarding property standards. We, as the HOA, only wish to preserve the beauty and value of our neighborhood by evicting veterans from their own homes. A voice called out from the back. The room rippled with laughter and applause. Karen's face went crimson. Order! she barked, slamming the gavel. Order or I'll… What? Another neighbor cut in. Call the sheriff again? Worked real well last time, didn't it? Phones went up, recording. People were smiling, enjoying the reversal of power. For years, Karen had been the terror of the block. Now she was the punchline. I stood, letting the chatter die down. Let's set the record straight. The HOA has no authority to evict homeowners. None. What Karen did wasn't just overstepping, it was illegal. My grandfather has lived here longer than most of us have been alive. This community was built by people like him, not by bylaws and fines. There was clapping again. Even some of the board members looked guilty, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Karen tried to regain control. That's not the point. The point is that rules matter. Standards matter. If we allow one person to ignore them, the whole community suffers. Grandpa, who had been quiet until now, rose slowly from his chair. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words cut sharper than any gavel. I've been here since before this neighborhood had sidewalks. I fought for this country when half of you weren't even born. And you think some peeling paint and long grass is worth throwing a man out of his home? You're not preserving this community. You're poisoning it. The room erupted. People stood clapping and cheering. Some even shouted, "Tell her, Frank!" Karen's hands shook as she slammed the gavel again, but the noise drowned her out. It was over, and she knew it. By the end of the meeting, a motion had been filed by the neighbors themselves to remove Karen as HOA president. The vote wasn't even close. She and her cronies were out. Walking home with Grandpa that night, I could feel the weight lifted from the entire street. Neighbors we barely knew came up to shake his hand, thanking him for standing up to Karen. For once, people weren't afraid of the HOA anymore. As for Karen, her SUV disappeared from the neighborhood within a month. Rumor had it she sold her house and moved to another city. I like to think she tried to pull the same stunts there, but after our showdown, she was probably a little less confident about calling the cops. Grandpa still lives in that house. His roses bloom wild, his shutters still creak, and his yard looks exactly the way he likes it. Nobody complains anymore. And me? I still travel for work, but now I check in on him every week. Because if there's one thing I learned from Karen's little war, it's that family isn't just worth fighting for. It's worth winning for. So when the HOA tried to evict my grandpa while I was away, they thought they were picking on an old man with no backup. What they didn't know was that the backup was me. And the cops they called? Yeah, they work for me. And in this neighborhood, that means checkmate. Bye. See you in next video.